So last time I was here sharing with you, we covered 1 Samuel chapter 19, and I entitled that study, Loyalty Wanted. So just to give you a little bit of background, tonight is Loyalty Wanted Part 2. So to bring you up to speed, just to kind of catch you up with what's happening in the book of Samuel, in chapter 17, David kills Goliath, and that is a familiar passage. So now David wins favor with King Saul. You know, he's everybody's favorite. He's a sweet child right now. In chapter 18, Jonathan and David become friends, and they have a deep friendship. David moves into the king's court, and, you know, he is ministering to Saul. He is serving there at the king's court. He's gaining popularity. He's getting victories, and King Saul becomes jealous. That tends to happen sometimes. So Saul now tries to kill him on several occasions. That is what's going on. That's the dynamic of the relationship between King Saul and David. This little lowly shepherd boy who took on a giant and won a tremendous victory against the Philistines on behalf of Israel is now very popular, and King Saul, very insecure, he is very jealous, and he has tried to kill him on several occasions. In fact, in 1 Samuel chapter 19, we see God's faithfulness, and he spares David time and time again, and he uses loyal people around him to protect him from being captured and from being murdered. Several times, Saul fails because God uses loyal people like Jonathan, his very friend. He uses his wife, Michal. He uses Samuel, and God himself protects David's life time and time again. So for tonight's thought of the passage, if you can jot it down, if you're taking notes, there's only 4 pages of notes. Loyalty stands firm despite conflict, danger, hurt, misunderstandings. Loyalty is rooted in love. The outline for tonight, point 1, David's fear and Jonathan's assurance. And we will cover that in the first 11 verses. Point 2, we have the loyalty covenant between friends, verses 12 and 23. Number 3 is loyalty tested at the banquet, verses 24 and 34. And I always think about Pastor's phrase, right? The faith that can be tested can be trusted. The same can be true of loyalty. Sometimes our loyalties are tested, and we will see that in this passage. And then point number 4, the painful farewell, verses 35 and 42. By the way, if you don't have the notes, if you didn't pick them up when you came in at the door, then you can download the church app. There's 4 pages of notes, and you can just jot down. There's a lot of material to cover. We're only covering the whole entire chapter, which is 42 verses. You know, just 42 verses, not a whole lot to cover. Same price, by the way, you know, so that's tonight's promotion, 42 verses for the same price. So 1 Samuel, point number 1, chapter 20. First 2 verses, we have David's fear, and we have Jonathan's assurance. Verse 1, then. Why is it then? Here's the context. In chapter 19, we had David fleeing to Naioth. That's where the prophet school was with Samuel in Ramah. And now there's a turn of events where David, now it says here, David fled from Naioth in Ramah and came and said to Jonathan, what have I done? What is my iniquity? And what is my sin before your father, that he is seeking my life? Why is your dad trying to kill me? Now, David questions Jonathan regarding Saul's intentions. Saul is Jonathan's father. Why does he have a price on my head? Why does he want to kill me? Think about this. David could have stayed in hiding. This whole time he could have said, you know what? I'm just going to run away. I'm not going to come out. I'm just going to stay there until Saul dies and somebody tells me it's safe to come out. But he has this desire to find out the truth. Why? Why does your father want to kill me? That makes no sense. Maybe David wants to mend that relationship. It's worth risking his life. Verse 2, he said to him, far from it, you shall not die. Behold, my father does nothing, either great or small, without disclosing it to me. So why should my father hide this thing from me? It is not so. Jonathan keeps insisting, no way, Jose. You're not going to die, David. I don't think Jonathan is necessarily naive. But maybe he is one of those types of persons that chooses to see the best in people, to see that potential. Hey, look, I know my dad, Saul, he's not there yet. I know he's rough around the edges, but God is not done with him yet. Maybe there's more potential in him. Maybe he doesn't want to kill you, David. He doesn't come across as somebody who's cynical or jaded. Like we are often, after we spend a little bit of time on this earth, we see how dark and how putrid and how polluted human nature is, that we become cynical and we become dark and jaded. We become pessimistic. We become skeptical of people. We don't give them the benefit of doubt anymore. We don't think good of them. Jonathan doesn't come across as that type of personality. Maybe his character and behavior are more consistent with somebody who is deliberately choosing to see the best in people rather than the worst. I am reminded of Pastor Chuck Smith. I was very fortunate to live in a time where I got to sit under his teaching in person. And he has said, I'd rather err on the side of grace. Sometimes we just write people off. They upset us, they do us wrong, and we choose to protect our heart, and we're like, you know what, that's it. I'm done with people. I don't think Jonathan is portrayed like that in Scripture at all. This life can be tough. This life can be very sad. But we need to look at the potential in people. We can see them as somebody who the Lord is working on, and the Lord hasn't given up on them. And I try to say, Lord, have grace on them. If they don't know Jesus, if they don't know the Lord, oh Lord, please reach them, because I know who I was before I came to Christ. And I know what the Lord is doing in my life, because He is faithful to complete the work that He has begun in me. Would you say that of your life? Is the Lord faithful to complete the work that He has begun in your life and in your heart? You don't realize how far you've come sometimes until you stop and look back and you think about where you were when the Lord found you. You don't stop to think about it until maybe years down the road. Maybe there's a journey you've taken and you're so busy just pressing forward. Sometimes you can barely crawl, you can barely walk. Sometimes it's like, Lord, please carry me. I can't get through this. But suddenly you have a chance to look back and you say, man, the Lord has been good. The Lord has been faithful. The Lord has delivered me. The Lord is not done with me yet. It is important, though, that as we give people the benefit of doubt, you can expect to be hurt and you can expect to be disappointed, because that's human nature. So let me remind you to not fix your eyes on any person or on any man or any personality. That is one of the best pieces of godly advice that a man once gave to me. He grabbed my shoulder and said, bro, let me tell you something. Never set your sight on men, because men will fail. Men will let you down, but Jesus will never let you down. So we should expect the best of people. Let's not be naive, but let's not write them off. You can expect to be hurt. I know it's a coping mechanism to protect our hearts and protect our feelings, right? Because we've been wrong before. But the Lord is not done with them. But we should keep our eyes on Jesus. Hebrews 12:2 says, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and the perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. We have Jonathan being a good friend to David, and he's saying, trust me, friend, if I knew something was up, I would tell you. David is clearly afraid for his life. And he's no stranger to fear. There's several times where he's fearing for his life. He's on the run. In fact, in chapter 21, he is under the captivity of the Philistines, and that is when he writes Psalm 56. Verse 3 says, when I am afraid, I will put my trust in you. Oh, thank you, Lord, for scriptures like this, because there are times when we are afraid. And we'll talk about times when we are discouraged. But verse 3 can tell us a little bit about Jonathan's nature. his assurance towards his friend. He said, "Yet David bowed again, saying, 'Your father knows well that I have found favor in your sight. And he has said, do not let Jonathan know this, or he will be grieved. But truly, as the Lord lives, and as your soul lives, there is hardly a step between me and death.'" David is saying, man, I can feel death breathing down my neck. David can sense death nearby. Pastor Chuck Smith said of David in this passage, David just said, man, I'm living on the border of eternity. There's just one step between me and death. Your dad's after me, and he's trying to kill me. I don't know if you have ever felt such fear of death, if you've had the opportunity. Sometimes when it's happened to me, I don't realize it until afterwards. Man, that was close. That guy almost hit me. That could have been really bad. But to be in constant terror of night, thinking, you know what? Death is just hunting me down. David is discouraged. You know, it's okay to be discouraged. Maybe you're discouraged tonight. For whatever reason, you're going through something. Why would the Lord tell Joshua in that time of transition of leadership between Moses and Joshua to be strong and to be courageous? Maybe he had a tendency to be a little fearful, maybe a little weak, maybe a little discouraged. Why would Jesus tell his disciples to be of good courage? Maybe because they would be discouraged at times. Their heart would grow faint. Why would Paul remind Timothy that the Lord had not given him a spirit of fear or a spirit of timidity? Maybe he was timid. Maybe he was frightful. Maybe as a young man, he's thinking, man, I can't talk to these people. They're much older than me. They know things that I don't know. I'm just a youth. I'm a single man. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to teach them. I don't know if I'm the guy. I don't know if I'm the guy for the job. I fear. I'm discouraged. So it's okay to be discouraged. Take courage. You're obeying the Lord. You're serving the Lord. Stay the course. We are really, truly just one step away from death. You may have a diagnosis, and you might feel like you're closer, but in reality, life is short for all of us. The Lord knows the number of our days. James 4:14 says, "Yet you do not know what your life will be like tomorrow. You are just a vapor that appears for a time while and then vanishes away." We have a little saying among some of our friends, and we say, we're nothing but a vapor. And we laugh about it. I guess dark Christian humor. We are but a vapor. You can't take things too seriously sometimes. The Lord is our King. He is our God. He owns our life. He knows the number of our days. And we truly are but a vapor. Hebrews 9:27 says, "Inasmuch as it is appointed to men to die once, and after this comes judgment." When you're young, you really don't think about death. You're thinking, you know what, man, I'm going to go to school, I'm going to finish this, and I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to marry this, and I'm going to have this career, I'm going to drive this car, I'm going to buy this house. But as we age, we begin to feel the reality of life, this clock that only gives us a limited amount of days. Psalm 90, verse 12 says, "So teach us the number of our days, that we may present to you a heart of wisdom." Tremendous wisdom in us knowing that our life is short. So we can invest in things that really matter. I tell you, I constantly fight the clock. I'm constantly looking, what time is it? How much do I have left to accomplish this? And it's a balancing act. You want to give time to things that are important, your responsibilities, your job, then there's your family, there's your time with the Lord, there's your church, there's your time with children, which is really short when you think about it. If you have little children, you're like, man, time is just flying. You turn around and you're like, who are you? Dad. I know you're my daughter. I just don't know which one at the moment. And if your kids have grown, you're like, man, where did time go? And if it's grandkids now, you're like, who's your mom? Who's your dad? Growing up, we had huge families at the ranch, and it was always like the great-grandpas would say, "Whose are you?" That was the question. Who do you belong to? So many grandkids running around. I can't keep track. I can't even number them because I'm just going to forget the number anyway. We must live in a way where we redeem the time. It's been said that we must live in such a way that when we take our last step, the Lord says, "You're done with this last step." We have to be ready to step into eternity. We don't miss a step. Verse 4, then Jonathan said to David, "Whatever you say, I will do for you." So Jonathan is making a commitment to stand with David, even if it means that his father Saul wants to kill David. He's saying, "I'm standing with you. I'm going to be loyal to you, my friend." What that means is, what can I do for you? How can I help? Loyalty here is willing to do what it takes to serve a friend. I have friends that I'm so thankful for. I call them when I have a need. "Hey man, this happened. My dryer's making noises." What do? It's mad at me. The response is, "I'll be right there. How can I help?" A loyal friend is willing to inconvenience. In other words, they're willing to undergo their inconvenience, forego that for your help. There's no such thing as, "You know what, man, this is really not a good time." They're like, "Okay, you know what? Let me take care of this and I'll be right there." Jonathan is saying, "Don't worry, David. What can I do? How can I help you?" Sometimes a friend is hurting. Sometimes they are so helpless. You can stand by their side. Let them know that they're not alone. Sometimes they are sick. It's a diagnosis, and you're like, "There's nothing I can do." I've been by that bedside, and you're like, "Man, I feel so helpless. There's nothing that I can do." If the Lord wants to heal, I pray for healing. But I also know that maybe it's time. And I can tell you, you feel so helpless, but the very fact that you're there tells them that they are not alone. So make it a point to be there with those that are hurting. The Bible tells us to be there for those who are suffering and to be there with those who are rejoicing. You let them know that they are not alone. Maybe there is nothing physically or medically that you can do, but they don't have to be alone. That is called the ministry of presence. Just be there. Be there for them. Jonathan could have poked at David and said, "Man, you of little faith, dude, what do you mean you're afraid of death? O ye of little faith, show me your faith." But instead he makes himself available. He could have been a wretched counselor, like in the book of Job, his friends. Like, "Is there sin in your heart? Maybe that's why you're sick." But Jonathan doesn't do that. Jonathan says, "Whatever you need, I will do for you." Proverbs 17:17, you got to highlight this. I like the New Living Translation. It says, "A friend is always loyal, and a brother is born to help in time of need." That brings conviction to me. I thank the Lord for my good friends, but I also have to be a good friend. Not just call when I need something, but just call to check up on them. I have a friend who constantly calls me, "Hey man, just checking up on you." "Well, thank you. How are you doing?" "Good. I'm actually doing okay. How are you doing?" "I'm doing okay." "All right, good." We start talking, and then it's like, "Oh, you know what? Maybe I'm not doing so good." Maybe there's something that comes up in conversation, and we can keep praying for one another. Or maybe you have a problem and they have a solution. Loyalty listens. Loyalty comforts. And loyalty reassures, especially in a time of fear. We have a plan here, verses 5 through 7. So David said to Jonathan, "Behold," I love that word. I think it's so dramatic. "Behold," to perceive through sight, that's what it means, an apprehension, to observe something awesome. In other words, check this out. He says, "Tomorrow is the new moon. It's a monthly feast. for high officials, state officials. And I ought to sit down to eat with the king, but let me go that I may hide myself in the field until the third evening. Verse 6, if your father misses me at all, if he makes mention of me, right, then say, David earnestly asked leave of me to run to Bethlehem, his city, because it is the yearly sacrifice there for the whole family. So this is a test. He's saying, we're going to put this to the test so that you see that I'm not just imagining that your dad wants to kill me. He, in fact, wants to kill me. But that's okay. Let's give it the benefit of doubt. If he misses me tomorrow, I'm supposed to be there for this monthly feast. I'm not there. If he misses me, you just tell him I'm gone because I got to go back to my hometown to the yearly celebration of the hometown. You know? Verse 7, if he says, it is good, your servant will be safe. But if he is very angry, know that he has decided on evil. That's going to be the litmus test. Yep, he's angry. That removes all doubt. Your father definitely wants to kill me. But David is willing to give Jonathan a chance to see this for himself. Don't just take my word. Let the Lord reveal it. And let's let the Lord show us what truly is going on. Verse 8, therefore deal kindly with your servant, for you have brought your servant into a covenant of the Lord with you. But if there is iniquity in me, put me to death yourself. For why then should you bring me to your father? There is no need. He's saying, man, maybe I'm wrong. You tell me. Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I offended your dad, the king. And if that's the case, I tell you what, I'm right here. You don't even need to take me. You don't need to arrest me. You don't need to take me prisoner to your dad. You can just kill me. My life is truly in your hands. From David's perspective, I know what I'm asking you to do, my friend. I am asking you to betray the king. And I am asking you to betray your dad. So if I am sinning and if I am wrong, you have full permission to just kill me on the spot. You got to remember, Jonathan was a great friend, noble lad, wonderful heart. But he is also a warrior. 1 Samuel 14:6 says, then Jonathan said to the young man who was carrying his armor, come and let us cross to the garrison of these uncircumcised Philistines. Perhaps the Lord will work for us, for the Lord is not restrained to save by many or by few. So Jonathan, just him, and his armor bearer, his assistant, just them two. Jonathan tells his armor bearer, let's go pick a fight. Let's go to that garrison. Let's go to that little fortress of the Philistines. And let's go pick a fight. Let's go kill them. You know why? Because the Lord is mighty to save. Even if it's just two of us, or if it's a whole army, it doesn't matter to the Lord. The Lord can give victory. I love Jonathan. I think you probably gathered that by now, right? I love Jonathan. He's like, let's go. The Lord wants to do something great. What if? And I pray that we would be more like Jonathan. Say, Lord, what do you want to do? I'm ready. Please give me faith. Give me strength. Help me to see what you want to accomplish and not see the human limitations, because those are very obvious to us. We have 1,000 reasons why we don't want to do things, or why we can't do things, or why we can't say things, or why we can't apply for a certain job, or a certain career, or a certain school. We don't want to aim high because we don't want to be disappointed. We are so afraid of disappointment. We are so afraid of rejection. And what I tell the young adults constantly is, when we are young, we are so afraid of no. We don't know how to deal with disappointment. We don't know how to deal with rejection because we have this huge insecurity about us. It just crushes us. It breaks our heart. But I tell you, the older you get, the cost of regret is much deeper. When you get older, then you begin to think, man, I could have done this. I should have tried this. And I didn't. And that is a regret because I was afraid. So if you're young, you know what? Maybe the Lord is mighty to save. I'm going to take on this thing. And if the Lord opens doors, all glory to him. I have nothing to lose. Maybe the Lord will show his mighty hand, and I will be able to behold his power. Maybe you're a little old and you're like, man, I have so many regrets. I could have, would have, should have. Yeah, you know what? The Lord is greater than that. Press on, my friend. Press on, my dear saint. He is a warrior. 1 Samuel 18:4, we see that Jonathan gives his armor, his sword, to David. And then later, we see that Jonathan dies in battle in chapter 31. He is also pretty good with the bow and arrow, as we will find out momentarily. So 1 Samuel 20, verse 9, Jonathan said, "Far be it from you, for if I should indeed learn that evil has been decided by my father to come upon you, then would I not tell you about it?" New Living Translation says, "Never!" Jonathan exclaimed, "You know that if I had the slightest notion that my father is planning to kill you, I would tell you at once." Modern translation, Jonathan says, "Bro, I know what you're thinking, but I got you. If something's going on, I got your back. I'm going to take care of it. I promise to tell you what my dad is planning." Verse 10, then David said to Jonathan, "Who will tell me if your father answers you harshly?" Verse 11, Jonathan said to David, "Come and let us go into the field." So both of them went out to the field. I love Jonathan. You bring me problems. That is a practical problem. You're saying, how am I going to know if your dad really wants to kill me? And Jonathan says, let's go to the field. You bring me a problem, I will provide a practical solution. Don't you love it when you're in management and you have people that bring you problems, but they bring you solutions? The worst thing is when they bring you problems and then you're like, okay, so what do you want me to do? I don't know, boss. I just want you to fix it. It's like, okay, well, don't bring me problems. Bring me solutions. What are you proposing? Well, I got nothing, boss. And then you have those that are smart and bright, and they're like, well, boss, this is the problem, but this is the proposed solution. You're like, man, this person is promising. This person has a future. They are bright. We can do something together. Let's go to the field. Now, verses 12 to 23, the loyalty covenant between friends. Verse 12 says, then Jonathan said to David, the Lord, the God of Israel, be witness when I have sounded out my father about this time tomorrow, or the third day. Behold, there's that word again, right? Behold, if there is good feeling toward David, shall I not then send to you and make it known to you? I'm going to send somebody to tell you. Loyalty warns, protects, and acts courageously. If you want to jot that down. In other words, he's saying, my love is greater than the discomfort I will experience by risking myself in warning you. Doing what is right is more important. And sometimes we as Christians shy away because there will be discomfort when you talk to a relative that is going down a path of destruction. They're going to marry outside of God's will. They're going to marry the wrong person. They're going to do the wrong thing some way or another. And you want to avoid the confrontation or the discomfort accompanied with that conversation, so you just don't tell them anything. Man, that's not love. That is your own comfort. That is self-preservation. You got to love them enough to warn them, to protect them, to act courageously and say, don't do it. Verse 13, if it pleases my father to do you harm, may the Lord do so to Jonathan and more also. If I do not make it known to you, I'm going to warn you, he says, and send you away that you may go in safety. He understands that if it's not safe, David, you got to go. If there is really a threat upon your life, dude, you are not safe. You got to go. And he says, and may the Lord be with you as he has been with my father. Jonathan gets it right. Jonathan knows that God's favor is on David. God's hand protects David. He has seen it. We talked about it in the previous chapters. He confronted Goliath. And then the Lord has spared his life multiple times in chapter 19. Jonathan knows that there is an anointing upon David that only comes from God. God is empowering David. Do you know that the same can be true of you as a believer? You can have that anointing. You can have power in your walk with Christ when you honor him. The Lord honors those who honor him. What about other people around you? Man, it's important for us to recognize that the Lord can be blessing other people around you. And then it's so important for us to treat people around us with dignity, to treat them with love, to treat them with respect. You never know who you're dealing with. And I almost sound like a broken record. I get that. Every time I address you, I'm always talking about being a person and treating people like a person and making eye contact and shaking hands and learning their name. Why do I always say that? Because I didn't always do it. And I recognize that there is an element of compassion, if you would, when you make a connection that is real with people. When you go to Stater Brothers, when you go to a marketplace, and when you say, "Hey, John, how are you?" They just snap out of it for a second. "Hey, have a good day." People are not used to that kind of interaction anymore. They're used to interacting with social media on a screen that is about 6 inches. That's it. You see people sitting together, eating lunch together. They're not even talking to each other. You see husband and wife, and they're not interacting. You see kids on the devices, and nobody's talking. Everybody's on their own device, consuming brain rot. And you're like, what has happened? What has happened to this world? I see it now because I took the time to put my device down. But some time ago, I didn't notice it. I was part of the collective, part of the problem. But I tell you now, it is so important for you to be compassionate with people and to reach out to them. You don't know who you're dealing with, and that is not the motivation. People are people. They deserve good treatment, but sometimes you don't know who you're dealing with. You could be dealing with a future boss, and you're like, "Man, I shouldn't have been a jerk." Wow, now they're my supervisor. Great. Okay, I guess it is what it is. You could be entertaining angels. Pastor Terry was teaching us this Sunday about the sin of partiality, right? Through the book of James. And he mentioned the appointment that Jesus had with the Samaritan woman in chapter 4 of John. No one would talk to her. Rabbis would not talk to her, but Jesus made time for her. Christian, you got to wake up. You got to realize that you may be the only Bible that people ever get to read. You may be the only Christian that people ever get to meet. You may be the only godly interaction in their lives. The only true godly interaction. Because there's a lot of posters. There's a lot of people that call themselves Christian, but their life does not align with that sentiment or with that statement. But let them say, "You know what, there's something different about this person. I don't know what it is, but I am curious. I am curious." When I came to Christ, I gave my life to the Lord. I gave my heart to the Lord, but I didn't know the Bible. I didn't know what it meant to be a believer or to be a Christian. So I started observing the people around me. And I latched on to a particular couple that had a wonderful marriage. And they did devotionals, a family devotional, and they read the Bible. And the way that the husband talked to the wife and the wife talked to the husband intrigued me. Coming from a broken family, that was completely foreign to me. And the only logical conclusion to me was Christ. That is the common denominator in this household. That is the common denominator on the kids, the husband, the wife, Jesus. I don't have it all figured out, Lord, but one day, whatever it is that they have, I want it. It made me thirsty, like salt. It made me thirsty. And as I began to walk with the Lord and read the Bible and experience some of these things for my own, I can say, man, I am so grateful for those godly examples in my life. Because they pointed me to Jesus every step of the way. Verses 14 through 17. If I am still alive, he's like, man, dude, I may be dead. But if I am still alive, Will you not show me the loving kindness of the Lord, that I may not die? You shall not cut off your loving kindness from my house forever, not even when the Lord cuts off every one of the enemies of David from the face of the earth. Jonathan knows this is a possibility. If things go south, buddy, this is leading to a good, long-term goodbye. Because there are political implications and realities at stake here. So if my dad wants to kill you, you're going to have to run. And there's a chance that when the Lord promotes you, I will be dead. If I get found out, I will be dead. So please don't kill my family. That was tradition. When a new king comes into town, guess what? You take over the kingdom, you kill all of the descendants of the previous monarchy because you don't want to claim for that crown, so you are going to deal with it. But Jonathan is prophetically, interestingly enough, he is saying, the Lord will deal with your enemies. At this point, he has more faith than David himself. He's saying, I am sure the Lord will wipe out every enemy that you have from the face of this earth. And when he does, would you kindly remember my family? Because I may be dead, but would you please remember to show loving kindness to my family? Verse 16, so Jonathan made a covenant with the house of David, saying, may the Lord require it at the hands of David's enemies. 17, Jonathan made David vow again because of his love for him, because he loved them as much as his own life. This is interesting. He loved them as much as his own life. This is the second time that this is mentioned. Love them as he loved his own life. The first mention happens in 1 Samuel chapter 18, verse 1, and the second time happens here in verse 17. That reminds me of love your neighbor as, you know the answer, what is it? Love your neighbor as yourself. Leviticus 19:18, Old Testament. New Testament, Matthew 19:19, Mark 12:31, Luke 10:27, Romans 13:9, Galatians 5:14, James 2:8. In Matthew 22:36-39 says, teacher, which is the great commandment of the law? 37, and he said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all your soul and with all of your mind. This is the great and foremost commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. Jonathan says, I love this man David as myself. And even more important than Jonathan making that statement, the Bible records Jonathan as loving David as much as he loves himself. Leviticus 19:18, the word neighbor, from the Hebrew, rei, means fellow, companion, friend, associate, or fellow countryman. Some translations say, love your fellow man. Love your fellow man. The Bible says this about Jonathan, that he loved David as he loved himself. Reminds me of Jesus, the love of the Lord. In John 15:13-15, greater love has no one than this, that one lay down his life for his friends. And Jesus says, you are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you slaves, for the slave does not know what the master is doing, but I have called you friends, for all things that I have heard from my Father, I have made known to you. So Jesus is calling his disciples friends. Jesus gives his life for us. Verses 18-23, we have the arrows and the signal, this symbolic act that will seal their covenant. We have a special thing that is about to happen right here. And for this segment, I always insert the Mission Impossible theme song. Bum, 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 bum. Here's the plan, verses 18-20. Keep up. Then Jonathan said to him, tomorrow is the new moon, and you will be missed because your seat will be empty. When you have stayed for 3 days, you shall go down quickly and come to the place where you hid yourself on that eventful day. And you shall remain by the stone Ezel, and I will shoot 3 arrows to the side as though I shot a target. Here comes the code. Here comes the cipher. Again, bum, 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 bum. Verse 21, the good news. Best case scenario. Let me lay it out for you. And behold, I will send the lad, saying, go find the arrows. If I specifically say to the lad, behold, the arrows are on the side of you, get them, then come. For there is safety for you, and no harm, as the Lord lives. Bad news, verse 22. But if I say to the youth, behold, the arrows are beyond you, go, for the Lord has sent you away. Verse 23. As for the agreement of which you and I have spoken, behold, the Lord is between you and me forevermore. Remember me. Remember my family. We made that covenant. We made that promise. You know that loyalty reflects God's steadfast love. Loyalty reflects God's faithfulness. It mirrors it. We're going to have loyalty tested now at the banquet. We have the plan laid out. Now we go through verses 24 through 34. We're going to talk about David's absence between verses 24 through 27. His empty seat is going to reveal his true danger. Verse 24, so David hid in the field, and when the new moon came, the king sat down to eat food. Verse 25, the king sat down on a seat as usual, the seat by the wall. Then Jonathan rose up, and Abner sat down by Saul's side, but David's place was empty. Nevertheless, Saul did not speak anything that day, for he thought, it is an accident. He is not clean. Surely he is not clean. He is ceremonially unclean. So that's why he's not here. Verse 27, it came about the next day, the second day of the new moon, that David's place was empty. A little suspicious now, right? So Saul said to Jonathan his son, why has the son of Jesse not come to the meal, either yesterday or today? You can see that the king is starting to now be a little upset. Hey, why was he not here yesterday and today? I can understand one day, because the requirement is if he's unclean, he stays away for one day and then he's good. He can be here at the feast, but that's 2 days and he's not here. Maybe if you're a boss, worker, no show, no call, one day, and you're like, maybe there's an emergency, hope they're okay. When I get a chance, I'm going to check on them. By day 2, you're like, did they just walk off? Did they leave? Or is there something else going on? Saul says, why is the son of Jesse not here? By using that phrase specifically, that son of Jesse, he's saying, this kid is of low birth. Why is he not here? He pays no regard to the fact that David is now married into the family. David is married to his daughter, Michal. He is married into royalty, but he uses this derogatory term and he says, this son of Jesse, this guy of low birth, why is he not showing up? Verse 28, Jonathan then answered, David earnestly asked leave of me to go to Bethlehem. That's the cover story, right? Verse 29, for he said, please let me go, since our family has a sacrifice in the city, and my brother has commanded me to attend, and now I have found favor in your sight. Please let me get away that I may see my brothers. For this reason, he has not come to the king's table. So now he's giving an excuse that could be plausible, but he really is covering for David. And now theologians debate. They're like, well, maybe technically David really went to Bethlehem and then he came out to the field to talk to Jonathan. So maybe it's not a lie. The fact is, Jonathan is covering for his friend. We can surmise, we can speculate all we want, but we know that Jonathan is covering for his friend. That is a fact. Saul is angry with Jonathan. He's saying, why has he not come to the king's table? Every time I see that phrase, I am reminded of the Carousel Mall in San Bernardino. You guys may remember it a couple decades ago. In the 90s, I discovered King's Table Buffet. And that was the very first buffet that I ever really went to. And it was magnificent, for some time, until it wasn't. The king's table. Saul is angry with Jonathan, verse 30. Then Saul's anger burned against Jonathan, the language. Burned. And he said to him, you son of a perverse, rebellious woman, do I not know that you're choosing the son of Jesse to your own shame and to the shame of your mother's nakedness? Saul knows that Jonathan is loyal to David rather than being loyal to his own father. So this has hurt him deeply. Choosing to do what is right is sometimes very unpopular. But we have to choose to do what is right. And Jonathan is choosing to do what is right. He is protecting the life of an innocent man. He is protecting David. He's protecting his friend. During a recent press conference regarding the Iranian conflict, we're on day 5 of that conflict now, the Secretary of Defense or War, Pete Hegseth, was asked, "Sir, what are your prayers for our service members?" And he provided his answer. And towards the end of that answer, he said, "When I pray every day for them and for this mission, I pray simply for the biblical wisdom to see what is right and the courage to do it." That resonated with me. That gave me insight. That gave me appreciation. That gave me gratitude. And yeah, we need to keep our service members in prayer. And we need to keep our leadership in prayer constantly. And we need to pray for wisdom and courage. Matthew 10, 34, 37. Sometimes loyalty can bring division. In this case, loyalty to the Lord can bring division, even among family. Matthew 10, 34 tells us that, "Do not think that I came to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I came to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's enemies will be the members of his household. He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me." Sometimes there is divisiveness because of Christ. In Luke 12, 49, 53, "I have come to cast fire upon the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. But I have a baptism to undergo, and how distressed I am until it is accomplished. Do you suppose that I came to grant peace on earth? I tell you, no, but rather division. For from now on, 5 members of the household will be divided, 3 against 2, and 2 against 3. They will be divided, father and son against father, mother against daughter, and daughter against mother, mother-in-law against daughter-in-law, and daughter-in-law against mother-in-law." And then Luke 14, 26, 27. "If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry the cross, his own cross, and come after me cannot be my disciple." Some harsh sayings, carry your cross, consider the cost of discipleship. Sometimes making the right decision, sometimes standing for Christ and saying, I'm going to be loyal to God's word, I'm going to be loyal to God's desires and his priorities will make you tremendously unpopular, even with friends, even with family. Verses 31, back to our text. "For as long as the son of Jesse lives on earth, neither you nor your kingdom will be established." This is Saul speaking, and he's telling Jonathan, as long as the son of Jesse, as long as David is alive, your kingdom is not secured. You see, Jonathan is the next prince in line for the crown in this monarchy. And he says, "Therefore now send and bring him to me, for he must surely die." Things have escalated very quickly here. What happened? In chapter 19 of 1 Samuel, verse 6, Saul had just promised that David would not die. He had made a vow. Now he's changed his mind. But good news for Saul, good news for David, rather, and good news for all of us is that death needs God's permission. We best remember that. Even under the terror of night and the fear of death, you must remember, sister and brother, that God is the one who gives permission. And death needs God's permission. Verse 32, "But Jonathan answered Saul his father and said to him, 'Why should he be put to death? What has he done?'" Now we see Jonathan rising up. Loyalty confronts and defends. This is not an unprovoked confrontation. Please don't misunderstand. There is plenty of reason for Jonathan to rise up and confront. Christian, there is a time to stand and speak up. Pastor teaches us, man, to be the priest, to be the provider, and to be the protector. It's easy to be the provider. In fact, we take pride in that. I get up every morning and I go work really hard. I bring the bacon, right? That's a given. To be the protector, that can be easy for many. They're like, yeah, man, I got muscles. I can protect. Don't let anybody mess with my family. To be the priest can be difficult. But being a priest of the home is part of being a protector of the home. And sometimes being a protector means that you physically have to engage, and you have to rise up, and you have to make a stand. You have to present a defense. Verse 33, then Saul hurled his spear at him to strike him down. So now he's throwing a spear at his very son. We have seen him try to spear King David several times, but now he's throwing a spear at his very son. His hate for his enemy, David, is greater than the love for his own son. Just blinded completely by hatred. It's almost like this is a commentary on our current political climate. It's almost like they hate the enemy so much that they are willing to sacrifice country and fellow man. It is so sad. So Jonathan knew that his father had decided to put David to death. Can you imagine that spear just flying at you? And you're like, oh, yep, he definitely wants to kill David. No doubt, completely removed. Sometimes we don't want to open our eyes. We are living in this stubborn fantasy. It's like we know, but we don't want to see reality. We don't want to acknowledge the truth. It is so painful. Now, Jonathan is not naive. He's an optimist. He always wants to see what's best in people. But maybe it's time to admit that his father has murderous intentions. So we need discernment. Discernment can be defined as the ability to judge between truth and error. And the foundation for discernment is wisdom, the application of truth to life. James 3:5, but if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and it'll be given to him, right? James 3:13, who among you is wise and understanding? Let him show by his good behavior his deeds and the gentleness of wisdom. James 3:17, but the wisdom from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, reasonable, full of mercy and good fruits, unwavering, without hypocrisy. And the seed whose fruit is righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. You deal with tough situations. You deal with tough people. You got to make some tough decisions. You best ask the Lord for wisdom. It's not even an option. Matthew 10:16, New Living Translation says, look, I'm sending you out as sheep among wolves. So be as shrewd as snakes and harmless as doves. You got to be street smart. You got to have some wisdom. Verse 34, then Jonathan arose from the table in fierce anger and did not eat food for the second day of the new moon, for he was grieved over David because his father had dishonored him. He was grieved, defined as he was in emotional pain. He was in sorrow, vexation. Loyalty is costly. Loyalty can cost you public embarrassment, ridicule, loss of popularity, acceptance, promotions. Sometimes your loyalty is going to cost you money. It's going to cost you time. It's going to cost you tears. It's going to cost you suffering. Jesus was loyal to the Father's plan. Matthew 16:24. Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself, take up the cross, and follow me. There is a cost associated with doing what is right. Painful farewell. This is the saddest section to close out our text. Verse 35. Now it came about in the morning that Jonathan went out into the field for the appointment with David, and a little lad was with him. He said to this lad, run, find now the arrows which I'm about to shoot. As the lad was running, he shot an arrow past him. Jonathan is risking completely everything now because he is actually guilty of conspiracy to commit treason against the king. Under Title 18, for us, this would be persecuted as a seditious conspiracy. 37, when the lad reached the place of the arrow which Jonathan had shot, Jonathan called after the lad and said, is not the arrow beyond you? Verses 38 now and 39, and Jonathan called after the lad, hurry, be quick, do not stay. The codes. And Jonathan's lad picked up the arrow and came to his master. 39, but the lad was not aware of anything. Only Jonathan and David knew about the matter. Life can change so quickly. Oh my goodness. Somebody can pull that rug under your feet and you're falling to the ground. Verse 40, then Jonathan gave his weapons to this lad and said to him, go, bring them to the city. One day, he's at the king's court. The next moment, he's going to have to run. 41, we have the heartfelt goodbye. When the lad was gone, David rose from the south side and fell on his face to the ground and bowed 3 times. And they kissed each other and wept together. But David wept more. David and Jonathan embrace, they weep, they have this heartfelt farewell. They demonstrate humility, they demonstrate love, they have this covenant of loyalty. They are saying goodbye to maybe dreams of working together one day and doing great things for the kingdom. All those projects that maybe they thought about doing, maybe seeing their kids grow up together, things that we talk about as people, right? All of those dreams have vanished now. I don't know if you've ever walked away from something that you love dearly. Maybe a university, and you're like, it didn't work out. I wish I could stay. Maybe a job. Maybe a relationship that wasn't of God. And it hurts. And you know you're not coming back. Farewells are so difficult. One of the hardest farewells for me was when I left my country. I left because my mom was fleeing for her life. I was a child. She had no choice but to bring us with her, of course. You know, I was 10 years old maybe. So you don't get to say goodbye to anybody. You can't tell them where you're going. You have beautiful animals that you love, and you can't take them with you. You can only take as much clothes as you can put in a plastic bag because you got to hit the road. And you know when you get on that bus that you're not coming back. What about when somebody dies? That's a difficult farewell. When somebody dies and you know that you're not going to see them for some time. When they're believers, you know, Psalm 116:15 says, precious is in the sight of the Lord the death of his godly ones. So you look forward to that. Charlie Campbell's going to be here this Sunday. You got to be here. He wrote a book entitled Heaven. I had the chance to acquire that from him last time he was here. And I said, you know what? I have a lot of friends in heaven now. A lot of my friends and mentors and people that I love are now in heaven. And he said this to me. He said, Victor, I like to keep a list of my friends that go to heaven. And I have a document. I average about 5 people per year. And once in a while, I take out that paper and I read those names and I thank God for them and I think about the memories and I look forward to seeing them. I can't tell you how much that blessed my heart because I have so many people I look forward to seeing again. I tell you, man, thank you. So be here. Here's another difficult farewell. It's recorded in the book of Acts chapter 20. Paul is saying farewell to the Ephesians. And he says in verse 25, and now behold, I know that all of you among you who I went about preaching the kingdom, you will no longer see my face. Sometimes we have those farewells. Verse 42, to close out our chapter, 1 Samuel chapter 20 says, Jonathan said to David, go in safety, inasmuch as we have sworn to each other in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord will be between me and you, and between my descendants and your descendants forever. Then he rose and departed, while Jonathan went into the city. You might be thinking, if David is in God's will, why is he going through this? That can be said of many people in the Bible. They go through affliction. They go through the backside of the desert to get their PhD degree, like our pastor tells us, right? Backside of the desert. Moses and so on and so forth. Joseph. You're like, why did they have to go through affliction if they were truly in God's will? Well, sometimes the Lord allows it to hone our character. They made a covenant. They made a promise. And 15 or 20 years later, David has the privilege and the opportunity to fulfill his promise and to honor it with Jonathan's son, Mephibosheth, in 2 Samuel 9, verses 1 through 13. And it says in 2 Samuel 21:7, but the king spared Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, because of the oath of the Lord which was between them, between David and Saul's son, Jonathan. So this is Saul's grandson, Jonathan's son, Mephibosheth. When Jonathan died, Mephibosheth was about 5 years old. They lost to the Philistines, and the nurse is trying to get away. She takes the baby, or the 5-year-old kid. She drops him, so he ends up being crippled, both legs. He lives, but they ran away, so he lived in misery. Later, when King David consolidates the throne, he says, I am going to seek out any living relative of Jonathan. And he finds Mephibosheth. He brings him to the court, and he sets a place at the king's table for him. And he says, I will appoint a manager to manage all of the lands that belong to your family. I will restore them to you. And you will always have a place at my table. Loyalty keeps promises. Oh, may we learn to keep our promises as we develop loyalty in our lives. Mephibosheth sees himself as a dead dog. I grew up in a third world country. I have seen dead dogs on the street. I have smelled them. Now it's no longer a third world country. Now it's called a developing country. Great. It's made some improvements. I have a vivid picture in my mind of a dead dog. Mephibosheth says, I'm a dead dog. And the king has shown me mercy. I see myself as a dead dog. I am a debtor to God's mercy and God's grace. So we have a picture of a compassionate king and a dead dog saying, I am just so blessed. I am so grateful that I get to eat at the king's table. I don't know where you stand today with your relationship with the Lord. I pray that you would want to develop loyalty, that you would want to be a good friend like Jonathan, a faithful friend that keeps his promises like David. Maybe you don't know the King and you need to come to a right relationship with him tonight. Maybe you say, I'm a dead dog, I'm a sinner. I want a relationship with the King. And the Lord is reaching out to you today. The Lord wants you to have a life of purpose. He wants to use you beyond your imagination. He wants to bless your life beyond what you could think of, imagine. So he wants to call you and beckon you. By application tonight, a loyal friend loves and suffers together. Ecclesiastes 4, 9-6, 2 are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. For if either of them falls, the one will lift up his companion, but woe to the one who falls when there is not another to lift him up. Number 2, our loyalty points to God's loving kindness. Lamentations 3, 22, 23, the Lord's loving kindness indeed never ceases, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. Loyalty is costly, so expect persecution. 2 Timothy 3:12, indeed, all who desire to live godly in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. And loyalty and separation. So distance may separate us physically, but God's covenant keeps us united. 1 Samuel 20, the beginning of that verse, Jonathan, in verse 42, Jonathan said to David, go in safety, and as much as we have sworn to each other in the name of the Lord, saying, the Lord will be between you and me, and between my descendants and your descendants forever. Sometimes we have to part ways because the Lord has different plans for us, and separations are painful, but we can remain loyal